Hi all, it's PJ and welcome to the video supplement for bias piping, how to make bias strips and how to make 1/8 inch bias piping on your serger. The supply and material lists are all on the project sheet and full written instructions, step-by-step written instructions are on the PDF instructions. Let's get started with the process. I'm just going to start by saying that there are multiple ways to cut bias. This is just the method that I use. So if you have a method that you prefer, feel free to use that. I'm just going to demo how I like to do it. So to make the piping, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to cut the bias strips. So what I have here is a fat quarter, and a fat quarter will end up yielding about 7.5-ish yards of piping. So it's a pretty good value. All right, so here is your nicely pressed fat quarter. I've already trimmed off my salvage from this side. It doesn't matter whether this is face up or face down because you're going to end up sewing everything back together anyway. All right, so the first step, so step number 1, you've got your fabric laid out. Number 2, you're going to take the lower left corner and you're going to fold this up to meet this top edge here, along here, okay? The next step is you are going to take this top right corner, sorry, top left corner, and you're going to fold it down. So you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Let me see if I can get this all within the camera. There we go. Okay. Then you're going to turn this so that you can start cutting, and you're going to cut in this direction. And I've purposely used a stripe so that you can actually see the bias. So here's something that I like to do. Instead of just cutting this in half, to make this package a little smaller, I fold this into thirds. And I'm just trying to miss this corner down here. Get that up a little higher so it's easier to see. This way. And then I'm going to turn this way to cut. It just makes the reach that you have to cut a little bit less. So the strips that you're going to cut are 1 1/4 inch. So I've got my ruler. Also, you can use a smaller ruler on this too, which makes life a little bit easier to handle. So here's my ruler, and I'm just making sure all these folded edges are lined up. And I'm going to place my ruler here, and I'm going to cut 1 1/4. And I'm just going to cut 1 1/4 inches all the way across. And when I get done, I'm going to come back, and this first one, since it's on the fold, I'm actually just going to refold and then cut that in half. I just find it easier to do that. And I've got my 1 1/4 line lined up on that fold. And this should be a 90-degree angle from your flat here as well as here, if you've got 2 folds up here. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this. I'm not using the lines on the table. I'm actually going off of my ruler. I find that it's more accurate. And you're just going to cut all the way across. When you get down here to the end, unless you need all of that bias, you can skip these little pieces. So I'm going to go back to, this was the very first strip that I cut, and you can see it's twice the width that it really needs to be. So I'm just going to refold this. Whoops. Maybe we'll fold that into thirds so I don't have to switch rulers. And then I'm going to cut that in half. So there are all my 1 1/4 inch strips. Okay, so I've got all my strips cut. What I like to do is sort them. So you'll have one chunk that will be slightly shorter and then another set that will be a little bit longer. One of the things that I'm looking for when I'm sorting my strips, other than by size, is at least one and possibly two of your strips you'll end up with what I call a double-ended arrow. Let me put this here so that you can see. So it's here and here, instead of, the majority of them are going to be like this with just one way. If you have two of these, one of these is going to be your starting end and the other one will be your ending end. Since I'm only able to find one of these, this is what I'm going to use for my starting end. So basically, when I sew these together, I make two piles. I have my short strips and my long strips. So I just intermix the short and the long. And you're just going to flip these around so that your diagonal ends align. And then just keep flipping back and forth, and all of your pieces will sew back together again, and you won't have to recut any angles. Okay, so I'm going to gather up my piles and I'm going to move to the serger and we're going to stitch these together. All right, we're at the machine. So here is my starting end, the one with the two angles. I'm going to get to the end of that. So this is what I would consider a long strip. So my next one I'm going to add is my short strip. So I'm going to line this up so that my angles are going in the same direction, and then I'm going to flip this up. Now when you line this up, you want this edge aligned, and you want this part to be staggered. From here, this is where your left needle is going to fall, to here, that's your seam. So I'm just going to put this under, and I'm going to aim my left needle at that V, and then I'm going to use the marks on my foot here to aim for this V. Then you can take your next piece and line this up, and then flip, position, and serge that. So you can just chain these all together and then trim them all apart when you get all done. So I'm just going to trim this so that I can show you what this should be looking like. So when you open this out, it should all be going in one long line, and there's your seam. So you're just going to continue on with that until you have all of your pieces put together. When you pick up your piece, if your angles are going opposite, just flip this around. So you have all of your pieces sewn together. I'm going to go cut them apart and then press all the seams. The seams can just go to one side. We're now going to put the cable cord into our bias strip. So I start at my starting end. It really doesn't matter which end you start at. I leave a little bit of a tail out the back, and I have my P5 foot on, and I'm at my widest width and longest length, and you're just going to slide this under here to get it started, and the cord is going to run in the groove under the foot. This groove right here is going to be running, the cord is going to run under that. So you just need to get this started. And then hold your cord here and just fold this over. It's going to trim just a little bit. And you just need to stop and reposition. And there's your cord. So here's a little tip. When we go to sew this in, if you're making a join, you're going to want to be able to pull your cord out. On some of the 4-thread BabyLock models, the left needle is really close to the cord. So when you're making your piping, if you take out your left needle and just set this with only your right needle, you'll still be able to extract your cord because your cord won't get caught in the stitching. And then when you actually go to set it, you'll use both of your needles and then it'll ride right up against that cord. All right, so I'm just going to go through this whole thing. And there's all of my piping done.